have some important updates on the Gaza hospital explosion. A New York Times analysis suggests that a widely cited video of the Gaza hospital explosion does not shed light on what happened that day. The Times' Eric Toller explains an IDF spokesperson went on CNN and the BBC with a printed out screenshot from an Al Jazeera live stream showing this projectile, claiming it was the rocket that hit the hospital. We also believe that American officials are incorrectly assessing this to be a Palestinian rocket. He goes on to say, we geolocated 5 videos that showed this projectile launch from the north, south, east, and west by drawing lines of perspective, 3 of which can be seen here. We assessed that this projectile was launched from near the Israeli city of Nahal Oz. We cannot say with confidence what exactly this projectile is, but we know that there is at least one Iron Dome launch site in nearly the same location that overlaps from the sight lines we drew from the 5 videos. This site was still present in the satellite imagery this year.
This analysis from the Times follows a Wall Street Journal report from a few days ago that reached the exact opposite conclusion, analyzing security camera feeds within Israel and Gaza that, in the Wall Street Journal's view and the view of experts they consulted, suggests that the explosion at the hospital in Gaza was a failed rocket launch intended for Israel.
Yeah.
So the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have now looked at some of the same video footage and reached opposite conclusions, as have the experts that they consulted. I want to play some of what I found so persuasive to me when I watched the Wall Street Journal's video. Let's watch that.
The journal spoke to say this change in trajectory is caused by the explosion of the rocket motor. In camera 3, the Al Jazeera footage, facing east, we can see this minor explosion. Then, a trail of fire spreads as the motor blast ruptures the rocket casing and ignites the fuel. The rocket heads west in the direction of camera 3, with the hospital in its path. 15 seconds after launch, the rocket fails completely and breaks apart. There's a small explosion on the ground, then a second, larger explosion at the site of the hospital. A nearby resident captures the moment of impact facing northwest toward the hospital. Fire engulfs the courtyard and burns for an extended period.
Ya Allah! Ya Allah! Ya Allah!
Experts say the large fire is likely due to the amount of fuel still in the rocket just after launch. Explosives experts who reviewed the blast footage and photos of the aftermath see further evidence that the failed rocket was the cause of the explosion on the ground. This crater shows an impact pattern coming from the east, in line with the rocket's path. The shallowness of the crater is also consistent with impact from a failed rocket. Experts say the cars closest to the impact crater were likely hit with fragments from the rocket, causing one to explode and burning several others.
So that was older reporting that this actually opines on.
That this disagrees with.
Right, but it engages with it specifically and disagrees with it.
That's why I want to play it.
Yeah, so the new updated reporting by the New York Times analyzed 5 different camera angles and showed that the specific fragment that Israel and the United States have been pointing to as responsible for the hospital bombing was in fact detonated or was 2 miles away from this, which makes it very difficult to attribute it to this at all. So that doesn't answer any questions about what the actual cause was, but it does throw into pretty stark skepticism whether the evidence that has been pointed to as so conclusive is really exactly that. And it has raised, as part of a parcel of an ongoing group of questions about why it is that Israel seems to be putting out so much evidence specifically to defend this position that seems to have so many holes poked through it at this stage. So now not only do we have this taped audio call between 2 Hamas militants that they averred was evidence that Islamic Jihad had conducted this particular bombing, which has now been discredited. Obviously, people feel different ways, but I haven't seen anybody really affirm that the language used, the tone used. I haven't seen any Arabic speakers come forward and say, no, actually, this does seem credible. There are pretty significant credibility determinations, not just because of the tone and things like that, but also the audio signatures and stuff in the video and the way that it was put together. So they put forward that piece of evidence, which has been disputed, and now the video evidence, which I think a lot of people were putting a lot of weight on, seems to not align with the events of the evening. It does seem like this is one where everyone should just sit this out for a little while and see how it continues to pan out. Although, as time passes, it becomes less relevant in the arguments that people are making, because just a few days later, obviously, Israel did bomb the Orthodox Christian church, where, so regrettably, former Congress member Justin Amash's family members were killed, and the civilian casualties have gone through the roof, now eclipsing 6,000 Palestinians.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to get it right on how this happened and who's responsible. I mean, given the amount of media commentary on how the media handled this incident. So I read with obviously great interest the New York Times, counter correction, basically, of their view of what this video footage shows, and they are careful to note that they're not saying that the allegation that it was the Palestinian jihad is necessarily wrong, but that this specific piece of evidence that's been used to bolster that, they say does not show that. It doesn't show anything, essentially what they're saying.
Right.
They're saying this is a piece of evidence that doesn't show that attack. Obviously, as I played, the Wall Street Journal has reached the opposite conclusion, and the people they consulted looking at the exact same video footage. So I don't know.
I don't know that it's the exact same video footage is my point. The New York Times specifically sourced 5 different angles that I think it says helped it have a more precise determination. I
mean, the Wall Street Journal also did that. I mean, they talk about 5 security camera footage, including the Al Jazeera footage that the New York Times alleges. Their analyzers are just reaching a different conclusion than what the Wall Street Journal and Canada and the U.S. and Israel said, which could all be, they could be right and those people could be wrong.
So, first of all, it's 6 total, because the New York Times looked at the Al Jazeera footage along with 5 other videos filmed at the same time, including footage from an Israeli television station, Channel 12, and a CCTV camera in Tel Aviv. My impression was that they were accessing different video, a different batch of videos than what the Wall Street Journal had been able to look at, and that it was an add-on to the research that had been done previously by the Wall Street Journal. But I do think the important point here is that after the initial confusion, I would have hoped that there was not a rush to judgment to make conclusions in the other direction. And those of us who, in the night before the sun came up, who were running on the information that the hospital had fallen and that there was a different kind of explosion that would have indicated IDF's responsibility, because Hamas does not have that capability, and neither does the Islamic Jihad, were wrong in the morning about the evidence that we were relying on. Now, in light of evidence that the IDF has been putting forward, having holes poked through it, the response still has been, absolutely, it's not the IDF, instead of everybody taking a beat and calling for an international investigation. But both Israel and the U.S. have rejected calls for an international group like the UN to do an independent investigation, which I think raises even more questions about why that would be the case. So
right. The New York Times, it should be, even this, in just disagreeing on this one piece of evidence, does say in what I read that the argument about, that's why I want to particularly play that part from the video, the size of the impact crater and that kind of stuff does move in an accidental misfire from the Palestinian side direction, even though it doesn't prove it beyond any kind of definitive. But they're not contradicting that is a piece of evidence in that direction.
No, but the New York Times is very clear. Is very clear that the video evidence that has been used to corroborate the U.S. and Israel's claims does not do that at all.
Right, they disagree. So we don't know. I think a further investigation would be absolutely warranted, and we will continue to keep following that story for sure. Tomorrow on Rising, we'll have more updates for you, and also remember to tweet or comment below any question you'd like to ask us for Rising Ask Me Anything that will air this weekend.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who prefer to listen while you're on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Bye-bye.
Bye.